Over the years, I hear excuse after excuse of why people won't learn a certain language. And especially in this part of the world, across Asia, we have tonal languages too. And I'll always hear these excuses of why people, I just can't learn the tonal languages. I think a lot of it has to do maybe even with that word tone, because as soon as you hear tone, people in the West think of music and pitches and things. But I'm telling you, this disbelief in yourself, these excuses about being tone deaf, or even beliefs about, oh, this is how I learn a language. Really, how many languages have you actually learned to fluency? I'm going to tell you that everybody has the capacity to learn languages. We have this amazing system inside of us, and usually it's probably a negative experience or something that's planted a negative belief that has caused us to really think that, oh, well, this is too big a mountain for us to conquer. But I'm telling you that there are ways to not suck at language learning. And I learned those early on. I was lucky enough to have a grandfather that didn't put these blocks in my way. So I'm going to share with you in this clip 5 points on how you cannot suck at learning languages. On the other hand, you might get a whole new lease on languages that you never dreamed that you'd be able to speak. Number 1, don't expect your teacher to teach you. Now, normally when you learn a language, you'll be learning from a native speaker of that language. You may be living in the country that speaks that language and learning from people there, or you may be living in another country and somebody who speaks that language is teaching you there. Either way, most of the time, the native speakers of a language don't actually understand what's going on internally, in the muscles, and all of this other stuff around language. So if they're teaching you, maybe they're teaching you from a syllabus, maybe they've done courses in second language acquisition, and so that's good. They're knowing how to teach the language to a point, but there are some crucial things missing there. 1, they don't know what's going on in your system, in your muscles, in the native language that you speak. So whatever your mother tongue is, there are all these things that are happening in your mouth and your body that just people who don't speak that language don't realize. They don't know what's going on. Not only that, there are different ways that your mother tongue's language processes meanings, how it creates meanings, and all of these other things that are going on. So it's not possible that the person teaching you, unless they're actually a native speaker or they've got a considerable amount of fluency in the language that you speak, that they are going to be able to understand that and show you how to tweak things. So a lot of people go into language teachers and just say, teach me, and expect the person to teach them. I can tell you, with all the languages that I have learned, and many of them are up to levels where I will simultaneously interpret or be able to facilitate in those foreign languages, I've developed those languages to that level because I've gone and learnt them myself. I've been able to extract the language from the environment and analyze it and learn it myself. Have there been teachers? Yeah, there have been some teachers along the way, but the role of the teacher isn't to sit down and wait for them to teach me. I will extract things from them and find out why certain things that I've noticed are the way they are. Maybe they think they're teaching me something, but actually I'm getting another lesson from it. So the role of the teacher is not to teach you. They are just basically a data source for you to extract information from, and all of the learning, the processing, and then the output in the future of the language is actually all on your side of the court. It's not in their side of the court. Number 2 is probably the most important aspect of language learning. For me, the ear is everything, whether it's language or music or just anything. Now, could you imagine if you had a superpower when you ate any meal and you were able to break down whatever meal it was, or a cake or whatever recipe, you could break down that thing that you ate into all of its components, even the quantity of how many eggs, how much milk, and you would be able to write out that recipe of what you were eating and then reproduce it. Well, having ears, you have that ability. You may not have been trained how to do that when you were younger, but you have everything inside of you to be able to do that. When you hear sounds, you have the processing ability inside of you to be able to break out what's been said, how has it been said, and not only that, if you have a mouth and if you have lungs and you have these muscles inside, you also have the ability to reproduce. Now, why can't most people do it? Because they're not trained. most people will be born, they're born into a society that speaks a language, maybe a couple of languages, if you're in a country like, say, Switzerland, where most people speak multiple languages, but you'll be trained up in those languages or that language, and that's your life. You're never trained outside of that. And so one really, really important thing for me is that at an early age, I was able to start to train my ear, thanks to my grandfather, and also, I guess, thanks to being a musician. This is not something that's just limited to being young. You can actually train your ear at a later age, and this is actually part of what Mindkraft is when I put it together. I have exercises in there to show you actually that the ear can be trained at any age, and we've got people there even over 70 years old that are learning to train their ear. Now, the wonderful thing is, as adults, we also have some really cool tools that we can use, both mentally and physical tools, which I'll talk about because that comes into one of the later points, that you can actually train your ear up to do just like what I would have learned how to do as a kid. You can do it now at any age. So to be able to train your ear and hear things and break things down, it's just like this superpower of being able to eat a cake and then have instantly how many eggs, how much milk, and everything that went into that recipe. You're able to do that with your ears against any language. You just have to train your ear to think outside of your mother tongue sound system. But number 3, it's great to have your ear trained, but what use is that if you can't actually then speak the language? So to be able to produce language and understand how your body produces language is really, really important. Now, again, as adults, we have an advantage. There are many hypotheses out there about learning language and input hypothesis. So you have to sit and you have to be bathed in the language, just like a baby will go through the first couple of years of the baby's life, having the language around them until they start producing language. Now, as adults, I really believe that too, that you actually need this input and you need to be open to and have experiences to that language. You need exposure to that language. However, we as adults have the ability to accelerate that. I know that with my ear, if I have that superpower of being able to break down the ingredients of what my ear is hearing, well then all I need to know is then how to reproduce those things that I'm hearing. Now, if I can't hear them, I can't reproduce them. I might have approximates. I'll give you an example. When a Thai person hears the word what, okay, they might hear what, but what happens is a lot of native English speakers, they might train them an individual word and say what. In the Thai ear, they hear this t at the end. That doesn't exist in the Thai sound system at the end of words. So they're hearing this t, and the closest thing to them is like a s, maybe an s, or tape. P. They're hearing the lips producing this p, puff sound. The only thing that kind of resembles that at the end of a word is a f. So when a Thai hears an English speaker overpronounce the word what, they will say was, or tape, they'll say tape. That's because they haven't been able to tune their ears into what's actually happening to the lips outside of the mother tongue sound system, and then they also then don't have the ability to reproduce those sounds. Tape, what? And then realize actually in normal speech we don't actually say tape, what, we actually say tape and what. So in training your ears, you're hearing these different sounds, even if they're not existing in your mother tongue, but then you need to learn how to say tape at the end of a word, say for a Thai speaker or a Cantonese speaker, just doesn't exist. So you need to train these things back into your mouth so that then when you hear them, you can reproduce them. Now, these are just some examples, but there's a whole gamut of examples that you would have to learn how to reproduce. Voice sounds, unvoiced sounds, sounds like shh, and all of these things that may not exist in your mother tongue sound system, well, you can learn how to do it. Then, when you hear people saying it, you can hear it outside of your mother tongue sound system, and then you can reproduce it. So you're learning how to be sound agnostic or language agnostic. You can hear sounds outside of the scope of one or two languages that you speak, and then not only hear them, but reproduce them. So you need to learn how to train your mouth, train your body to produce sounds. And you can have fun. You don't have to be learning a certain language to learn how to produce the sounds of that language. And the more sounds you can produce, it's like adding tools to your belt that then you can actually use to produce language. You mightn't be learning the language now, but later on you might. So learn as many sounds as you can. Become a sound generating machine, and this is really going to help you in learning language. So you're not relying on a teacher, you've trained your ear, you've trained your mouth and your throat, now you need to train your mind. The way that you produce meanings, you think of things, is going to change across languages. I've worked for many years as an interpreter, as a simultaneous interpreter too. So that's not just waiting for somebody to say something, but to say it back instantly. To be able to do that, I need to be able to think outside of the meaning structures of any given language and just start to feel meanings. And then meanings will then fall into whatever the system is within a given language of producing those meanings. If I try to translate meaning one for one between languages, I'm going to die in the middle of interpreting. I just can't do it. It doesn't work. And actually, this is what the word interpret means. It means that I'm taking a meaning and that person is trusting that I know how to interpret that into a way that's going to be understood by the people who speak the language that I'm speaking. I'm interpreting. I'm not just doing a transference of one-to-one relationships. I'm interpreting, and people have to trust that. There is no one-to-one exact interpretation or translation of words between most languages. It has to be interpreted. So you need to learn how to produce meanings outside of the structures of the language that you speak in your mother tongue or whatever languages that you speak. To do that, it takes mind training. You need to have thought fluency. You need to learn about different structures, different ways of putting meanings together, and play with that. Mindkraft teaches us how to develop thought fluency outside of the structures of our own mother tongue's language system or whatever language it is that we speak. And so despite what language background you're coming from, you're able to actually start to think in meanings rather than thinking in language structures. And then later on, once you learn these language structures, you can just drop them back in. And then finally, have you ever had a textbook and you're reading it and think, I don't use this kind of language, or I don't want to have to talk about waiting for a train on a train station with Mary. This is not the language that people are actually using. Or your teacher prepares a lesson for you and thinking, what good is what I'm learning today actually going to have in the real world? What relevance is there in the real world? But they're probably just teaching you the way that they've taught, or they've paid for a syllabus, or this is the syllabus that people learn from and you're learning from it. So what I have learned is that the ability to collect data, analyze data, and then reproduce data, these are three processes in language learning. If you have technical skills to be able to collect data, so that could be from the internet now. We have language in blogs, in newspapers, in podcasts, in YouTube, in databases coming out. You can actually collect data from anywhere that's going to help you learn the language. There are native language sources, movies, everything. And then you have things like text to speech. You have speech to text. You have all of these different tools that you can use to collect data. And all of this data is going to be rich, real language data that then you can use to train yourself. So you're collecting the data, and then because you've done points 2, 3, and 4, you're able to hear what's going on, understand how you reproduce it, understand what's going on. Okay, these are the mind shifts that I'm going to have to do, and you can reproduce it. So these are the 5 key points. Not relying on your teacher. You need to learn to train your ear. Don't say you're tone deaf. As long as you can hear, you can train your ear. 3, you need to know how the body produces language and then be able to reproduce it. 4, you need to just change your mind and get thought fluency outside of your mother tongue structures. And 5, if you can develop some degree of technical skill in gathering data, processing it, well then you will not suck at learning languages. You have everything you need to learn not only one other language, but the languages that you can learn are unlimited. This is what Mindkraft is. Come into our Discord server, scan the QR code up top, join in the discussion, and join the Mindkraft community, because this is all we do. It doesn't matter what language background you're coming from. It doesn't matter what language you're learning. It all comes down to these fundamental core skills, and that's what Mindkraft is about. I'm Stuart J. Raj, and I'll see you on the other side.